why don't you have boundaries? We always wonder, how come my boundaries? I thought I was working on self-love. Have you been working on self-love for a long time? Like for a few years now? Self-acceptance, affirmations, but yet your boundaries are like you don't know how to set them. You don't know what's a healthy boundary. You don't know what's an unhealthy. So you just kind of like go to the cutoff. It's easier. Just, I can't do it. So you take, and then cut off. So is that healthy? So I'm going to start by explaining a little first how it's okay if you don't have strong, healthy boundaries yet. I'll explain why. So my name is Tanya. I'm a total beauty coach, as within, so without. And this video today is explaining boundaries. So if you want, comment, ask me any questions that I have not covered in this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Boundaries. Okay, so I want you guys to remember that in 2021, we are now in 2021, how boundaries have developed over the years. So I'm going to explain my life, and I'm sure very similarly, people all around the world have had very similar experiences in their family. So my great-grandparents had no concept of boundaries, especially women, no concept. Men as well, they were not allowed to defy authority. They would get beaten, shot, right? Boundaries, there was no boundaries. Then you come into like my grandparents. So my grandparents had the boundaries. They're like, hey, I don't like when you say that. And they're kind of like starting this. They may have spoken up, but guess what happened when they spoke up, right? You're not allowed, especially as women, to your husband, or if even men. Some men, you're not allowed to speak up against anything that you disagree with or that doesn't make you feel good. So you could be following a certain amount, a group of people, or even a religious group, a political group, whatever you're feeling, or even just a friend group. And if you disagreed, you were shamed. You were beaten up. So boundaries were extremely limited. So basically imagine boundaries only were born within our grandparents. So let's say you have the born. So immediately born, the boundaries are kind of born with our grandparents. And then you have your parents. So my parents are boomers. They were born in the baby boomer. And this was the peace and love and speaking up and rallies and women's rights. Like a lot of this came out, this whole thing of, wait a minute, I'm allowed to get divorced. I'm allowed to leave my husband. So they were the babies. Like as soon as they're born in the grandparents, and now all of a sudden you got these little babies of boundaries. So they're like, wait a minute, I'm going to take all your crap. I'm going to take it, absorb it. And then if you go too extreme, that's it. Now I'm done. And I'm going to divorce you. So we have these. So they were teaching us. They were saying, hey, you don't have to accept everything. I don't have to just follow and listen to everything. I'm allowed to express myself. And now we have us right here, right now. And here we are in 2021. And we have little babies that taught us certain things. So now we kind of grow up into the toddlers. And that's why I often call us the toddlers of boundaries. How are toddlers? When you see a toddler kind of like learning to walk. What does toddler, as they walk, they fall down, bump their head, cry, oh my God, I can't do this. But they always kind of try, right? They keep trying. So when we are the toddlers of boundaries. We do not have generations of people teaching us, hey, this is how you set healthy boundaries. This is what you do. So we are now still kind of doing the cutoff. And now we're learning. We're like, wait a minute, hold on. I don't like how you're talking to me. This is very disrespectful. I'm learning self-love. I'm learning that it's okay. So a lot of us are kind of confused within do I set healthy boundaries when we first meet? How do I say it? Do I cut people off? Do I still allow them? what is this making amends? Making amends, this is new. In our generation, this is very new of making amends. Before, it's like, I'm sorry, done. Our parents is like, you say, I'm sorry. Say you're sorry. Do you remember that? Our parents would tell us to say we're sorry. Now, no, that's not enough. You have to make amends. So as a toddler, for example, my mother was a preschool teacher, and I remember her teaching this. This is very related to boundaries, is my daughter, when she was very little, she bit another child. So she took the other child. The child was crying. She grabbed an ice pack. She made my daughter hold the ice pack on the arm of the child she bit. And she said, hey, listen, you have to grow compassion. You have to make amends. You have to help fix what you are. So this is where the boundaries, we're only learning this now. So I want you to first understand that don't shame yourself if you were in an abusive relationship for a long time and you didn't know what to do, or if you're only learning now boundaries. Please be kind to yourself and be patient, because you are teaching yourself now, and you have parents that knew very little about boundaries. So we are the new generation that will lead in the next generation to learn a little healthier boundaries. And it's funny because the next generation after is kind of doing the cancel culture, which is very similar to not knowing boundaries. We don't know yet. There's a lot of words we can't say. There's things we can't do. There's actions we can't take, yet we do. Some are very disrespectful. We are so lost in this society of boundaries, and we don't know where to go. So please be patient with yourself, number one, okay? So this is my first, a little talk about why we're feeling these boundaries. And the next step now, we're going to talk about how to go about setting healthy boundaries. So I want you to know, getting into a friendship or a relationship with anybody, any relationship you have, whether it's with your children, with your partner, with your friends. Now remember, we all have pasts that either have been traumatic or not, or whatever. We all come from the past. So sometimes our boundaries can seem irrational to other people, but to us make a lot of sense. Let's say in a relationship you were cheated on. Now remember, if you're somebody that's going extreme jealousy and your boundaries are so irrational that you're hurting yourself and hurting the other, this is where I strongly suggest you check out my video on where do I start. And that video is mainly for people of where do I start about the self-healing and learning to own your feelings and where to go for self-love, so you're not depending on another and gripping on another because you're very insecure or you're feeling all sorts of stuff because of trauma. With every single person, we are all going to have different boundaries, and you have to know what they are. If you just go into any relationship not having any boundaries, not knowing, you're never going to set them. So if somebody comes and sees you and talks about certain things or makes you feel any kind of way, and all of a sudden you break it off as a friendship or a relationship, or you say this is not okay, it's because you had no idea. If you are just figuring out your boundaries as you go, then you can express that to the person saying, listen, I'm figuring out my boundaries. I'm not sure, but this is making me very uncomfortable. Now, whatever boundaries you set, I'll give you some examples after, but whatever boundaries you decide to set, you have to understand that the partner or the friendship or even your children, whatever you are, is that if they do not set these boundaries, there will be consequences. And this is why a lot of people are unsuccessful with boundaries, because they have boundaries, but they have no consequences. Therefore, they don't really have boundaries. Boundaries are, if you cross this is what will happen. So every time this happens, that will happen. This is something that is my boundary, and that is the consequence. Now you bring it a little further, is that you can tell them. So if it's an extreme boundary, let's say, I'll go back to the example of cheating. Let's say if you cheat, I cannot stay in the relationship and I will leave. Some people don't have that boundary. Some people say, hey, we'll go to therapy, we'll work it through. So everybody has their limits. So whatever you do and whatever you decide. So let's say in a friendship, I'll give you an example. Friendship or relationship with your parents or whatever, and you say, if you speak to me with condescending words or mean, and you don't make me feel good, I'm going to leave. Now, doesn't necessarily mean break up. You could just say, I'm going to take some time for me. I'm going to leave this situation right now. When the boundary when you set the boundary at the beginning of the relationship, chances are the person is already aware. But we are all human. We may cross other people's boundaries. You yourself this person may have set a boundary and you forgot, or you just were in your emotions and you crossed their boundary. It's okay to do that. This is why warnings are really important. So let's say you're at a family gathering and a party, and your parents are being very mean or condescending to you or making you feel any kind of way. You can express then and there, even though they know that it's not okay, you can express, this doesn't not feel good. So you're not attacking anybody, and you're not going back and you're just owning what you're feeling. This is not making me feel good. And if this continues, I'm going to have to go because I can't stay in an environment where I don't feel good. And you're expressing this feeling. Now, remember, we are the toddlers of boundaries. So chances are people around you may not take you seriously because we're not used to it. So remember this, when you start setting boundaries, it's okay that other people are not, they may not believe you, they may shame you. This is going to happen. And this is inevitable because we're living in a world where boundaries are just kind of like whatever, right? Not really respected. But if you keep going and you keep persisting, eventually you won't even have to say anything anymore. People will automatically know. You'll be sitting there. Let's say you've set these boundaries 4 or 5 times and your parents want to see you and you're sitting with them and you say, I don't like the way you're talking to me. Your parents may stop. They may not apologize depending on the generation, but they will stop because they know the consequence. They know that you're going to leave. So the more you set these healthy boundaries, and they're not attacking, they're not on anybody, and the more you're going to get respected, the more it has to be, it's a process, guys. We have from toddlers, then we're going to go into young children of boundaries. And then the young children, that's why I call the generation that under us is the cancel culture, because I don't know if you're familiar with young children in elementary, when they don't want to play with their friend anymore, they just cut them off. And guess what else they do? They tell all their friends, don't play with them. My daughter used to come home crying because her one friend told all her other friends not to play with her. This is why the cancel culture is very common in the generation below us, because, hey, don't play with them. Let's everybody cancel them. Not just us, the whole world. We're going to now going into making them feel not good because they made you feel not good. The world is evolving extremely slowly, but it's evolving into a way, and hopefully that we keep showing the healthy boundaries to our children and their children, and we're going to kind of set them. And to remember, if you are still in the cutoff and that's your boundaries, you don't know, you take, and then I can't do this anymore, screw you, you're done. It's completely acceptable because this is where you're at in your boundary setting. Okay, so don't shame yourself for any step where you are. If you're very good at setting boundaries, that's great. Some people don't even have to set boundaries. Some people's energy is pure boundaries. They walk into a room, nobody disrespects them because they just have that energy. They have a strong self-worth and self-acceptance of that. So wherever you are in your life, I'll give you a lot more examples moving forward and more videos and stuff about boundaries. I'll be talking about this a lot because I find the toddlers, we got to teach ourselves. I want to help you kind of like a toddler and say, you can do it, we can do it. You know, like when a toddler is learning to walk, because I'm also in this generation and I'm also fumbling and doing all this with boundaries. So we're all in this together. There's nobody exempt of this whole boundary shift that's happening in the world. All right, guys, if you have any comments, please feel free to comment and let me know if there's anything that I didn't cover. Don't forget to like, and if you haven't already, subscribe, and let's do this together. Okay, love you guys.